Good morning. Welcome to the incident critique of the railroad derailment incident, hazmat incident that occurred on 9/28. My name is Mark Corbeil, and I'll be giving you this incident critique. The alarm number was 2023-09-28-007, and it occurred on the 28th of September, a few days ago, and my responsibility on that call was Hazmat Battalion Commander 1 and then Incident Commander. The dispatch time for this incident was at 9:07 in the morning. I assumed command at 9:14. We were relieved, or I was relieved at 2100 hours by Chief J. Stewart. The incident, as you all know, has involved the 4-tank derailment at 4800 Old Port Industrial Road. This resulted in a chlorine release of potentially a maximum of 205,180 pounds of chlorine, plus a few other chemicals that did not get released. This was close to a high density of people shopping, visiting in the historic Smallville, and resulted in both a evacuation, exclusion zone being established, and then of course addressing the leak, which was stopped. The strategy for the incident had two main parts to it, really. The first was to establish and evacuate an exclusion zone, a zone of protection, to avoid anybody getting hurt while the leak was happening or anything after the leak. The second overall strategy in the action plan was to evaluate, monitor, access, and of course stop any leaks that occurred. The time to achieve this, the evacuations were completed in about 2 hours by about 11 o'clock in the morning on that same day. Leak control was completed and verified at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, about 6 hours after the incident. The tactical sequence, the fire department, Smallville Fire Department, established an exclusion zone and started evacuations almost immediately. They also assumed command at 9:07 upon arriving on the scene. This was followed by evacuations and establishing the perimeter, which was assisted by the police department. Then the next sequence was establishing the hazmat operations unit, and then including the railroad special tactic unit to monitor, prepare, enter the zones, access, and then stop the leak. Decon, cleanup, and termination, of course, at the end of that. There was really no changes to the action plan throughout the incident. It was clearly a large release of a chemical, and the action plan was evacuations, establishing the exclusion zone, and stopping the leak, basically. Let's see. The orders given, the first alarm at 9:07 included Engine 1, who made initial contact, took initial command, and established the initial zones and evacuations. They were assisted by Engine 2, who mostly assisted with evacuations and then assisted with the command post. Engine 4 established the zone and started southside evacuations upon their arrival. Engine 12 established the zone on the west side and did the west side evacuations in zone. That was also completed and taken over by the police department, who took up the perimeter later on. Part of the first alarm was Truck 1 or Ladder 1 assisted Engine 1 with evacuations on the east side. Ladder 4 assisted evacuations on the south side. Hazmat Battalion Chief 1 assumed command from Engine 1 at 9:14, established a command post, and we initiated operations and put up the unified command. Hazmat 1 established monitoring decon, put together the decon corridor, entry support, hot zone response. Was all supported by that. The second alarm included engine 5, initially staged, and they assisted engine 1 in evacuation, setting up the command post. Engine 6 staged and assisted engine 4 on the south side. Truck 12 assisted over on the west side. They assisted engine 12 with the evacuations. Hazmat 2 arrived and assisted Hazmat 1 with hazmat operations. Railroad hazmat specialist team assisted hazmat operations, entry and leak control were their main tasks. Police department assisted evacuation, secured perimeter, were part of the unified command at the command post, communication, staging, crowd control, and especially traffic control. Problems encountered, we had some coordination problems, some staff support, communications, personnel problems, some safety problems, and just some other particular things. The initial response was way overwhelmed with the number of people and inadequate personnel. We went to a second and third alarm almost automatically, and then needed to request a special hazmat team. So that was kind of a delay response as we went through those steps. Inadequate staff during the initial response was that big problem there. Interagency communications was seriously hampered by the non-interoperability of a radio system. We're on different dispatch units, dispatch channels, radio frequencies, technology, reliance on cell phones, and it was an underlap of communications definitely throughout. Personnel occasionally misdirected or not appropriate for the task. That was another issue that was also associated with the communications. There were some delays in monitoring, command posts, little delays there in getting the different agencies working together and establishing the unified command. There were a few delays there. The recommendations that come out from those problems, and of course all of those things created a safety concern. So that's why safety was initially a concern, but once we got that all communicated and under control, we took care of that. Recommendations on these kinds of events, the recommendation, the first one, the overlying one, is an automatic 3-alarm and 8 hazmat specialist request in terms of the railroad. That is definitely a major recommendation that we think is appropriate for this response. Second recommendation, which is common when we have these large events, is to review our interoperability in radio communications. And that partnership in communications definitely needs some work and technology, funding, and all of those things. A third recommendation is an update of the agency response information. It's always good to have that new information, that recent information at your fingertips. And regional training to include interagency approaches. So it was clear that the agencies had their own response, but the recommendation is maybe to do a little more interagency training. Some recommendations, just generally training staff in support and ICS staffing, making sure that all staff can staff at all the positions in the ICS and support that. That's part of the learning curve there. And then especially fifth recommendation between the fire department and police department is joint training on large-scale evacuations and reviewing transport and location resources. This was a unusual event. The small town was very, very busy at this time, and it was probably the worst, maybe not the worst, but a pretty challenging situation to do that evacuation, and it did take 2 hours, so it's always be a good idea to improve that. And now I'll be able to take questions about that. Just recall that yesterday the details during the post-incident analysis yesterday include more details about the timeline, units, and some other tactical details, I can answer questions for you for that. Could also answer questions for you about the recommendations and some of the thinking behind them. The interoperability question is always one that comes up, which often depends on day-to-day operations, which are usually separated in different dispatching units and radio frequencies and that sort of thing, where we keep trying to move those together. So that's always a good idea, and always improving training and increasing training is always a great idea as well. So, any questions? Thanks. Again, this was a incident critique of the railroad derailment on the 28th at 4800 Old Port Industrial Road. My name is Mark Corbeil. My contact information is thus, and we have a written response for this that we'll include in the media packet. Thank you.